Thank you all for joining us for what I believe is a critical conversation as we continue to talk about building an equitable economy. I am honored to welcome President Z. Scott of Chicago State University. On July 1st, 2018, Z. Scott Esquire was unanimously elected by the Board of Trustees to serve as the 12th permanent president of Chicago State University. Since her appointment, President Scott has overseen the development and advancement of the CSU strategic plan, which began last year and will run through 2025, ensuring that the institution will lead with the mission of transformation for students' lives through innovation and excellence in ethical leadership. Prior to her tenure at CSU, President Scott was an equity partner in a national law firm with an international practice that focused on corporate internal investigations, counseling clients on regulatory compliance, and crisis management. She also spent more than 16 years as a federal criminal prosecutor in the position of Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Northern District of Illinois. As a distinguished business and civic leader, President Scott has played an influential role in the Chicago community for over 30 years. She currently serves on the board of directors at Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital Medical Center, the United States Coast Guard Academy, and the Shedd Aquarium. Last September, President Scott convened over 40 leaders from across the state, representing secondary and post-secondary education, elected officials, government agencies, businesses, community-based organizations, and philanthropy to address the racial equity gap that exists from high school graduation through entry into the workforce. The mission of this working group, which I am so happy I had the privilege to be a part of, was to identify actions needed to close those gaps and enable Black students, their families, and communities to not just survive, but to thrive in Illinois. As a result, an action plan was created, which I will now turn over to President Scott to begin her presentation. President Scott, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of our discussion this afternoon. I'm very pleased, Cherita, that you were able to join us and became committed to the work as you've always been, and that you will continue on with us on our journey to implement the action plan. We wanted to introduce the audience first to Chicago State. And I also want to say thank you for that warm introduction. I'd like to get a copy of it because I think you succinctly summarized my over 30-year career. But we wanted to begin by showing people a little bit about Chicago State, because many people are not really aware that there is a public university, full service liberal arts public university on the southeast side of Chicago that is serving so many people and doing so much for Illinois. So we wanted to provide a short video on that.
Let's put your ambition in motion. Let's turn roadblocks into new paths to success. For over 150 years, Chicago State University has fostered ambition, started careers, and built successful lives of accomplishment for our students. Now, it's your turn. At Chicago State University, you'll find 5 academic colleges, 56 degree programs in all. Our School of Pharmacy is #1 in the Midwest for educating minority student scholars. We're ranked first in Illinois and second nationwide among public universities for educating and supporting African American student scholars. We've achieved 100% job placement in nursing, pharmacy, and occupational therapy. We're #2 in the nation for graduating Black physics majors. For economic mobility, CSU is in the top 4% nationwide among all colleges and universities. And you get the attention you deserve because on average, there are only 10 students for every faculty member.
We have some of the best professors, some of the best mentors. You have people that uplift you, that will open doors for you, that will help you.
It's an opportunity where you're able to make a change.
Chicago State University. Put your career in motion, your connection to friends and professors in motion. Put your future in motion. Chicago State University.
Okay, I know you're getting ready to go to your presentation, but I love that video. It was my first time seeing that. And I am beaming with so much pride for Chicago State. I am a lifelong Southside resident. Chicago State is pretty much in my backyard. And so many of my friends and family either attended Chicago State or graduated from Chicago State for undergrad and some for graduate school as well. So that just made me smile. So congratulations on creating a video that truly represents, right, the excellence of this school. So thank you, President Scott.
Well, I know that one of the things I wanted to also emphasize is that Chicago State is Illinois' only four-year predominantly Black institution. Many people ask us if we are a historically Black college. We are not. However, we were founded at the same time as many of our historically Black colleges throughout the country. But Chicago State is, by definition, from the United States Department of Education, a predominantly Black institution, meaning that we meet the DOE definition. We serve over 1,000 undergraduate students, and at least 50% of those students are low income or first generation degree seeking. We have we're lower resourced as an institution, and we enroll at least 40% African American students. In fact, our population of African American students sits between 69 to 70% each year. So we are, again, Illinois' only four-year predominantly Black institution. We are a PBI. You talked a little bit, Cherita, about the work of the Equity Working Group, and I know that you had the experience, and again, you have been willing, and you're an important asset to the university, and your willingness to continue on with the work. But we created, as you mentioned, a panel of leaders from across the state in response to data that showed that the rate at which Black students are going to college has dropped 34% since 2013. And we know if we look at that statistic and think about what it really means to Black Illinois and what it means to Illinois, we know that it's a crisis statistic. And in the wake of hearing a statistic like that and seeing the murder of Black George Floyd and thinking about all of the inequities that have plagued the Black community for decades, Chicago State and my team came together to form the Equity Working Group. And it included leaders, as you mentioned, from across the state. We were co-chaired by myself, president of the Chicago Urban League, Karen Wilson Freeman, Senator L.G. Sims, and John Atkinson from the Illinois Department of Higher Education, really with the understanding that if we are to tackle this as a problem, and it is an Illinois problem, we needed to bring together all segments of Illinois to figure out how to best support our Black students. We were fortunate in that we were supported by the Civic Consulting Alliance with their motto, getting big things done. And the Lumina Foundation helped provide facilitation assistance to the project. We had phase one, which was the work. And then we went into phase two, which was the action plan. Now we're in phase three with standing up and implementing the work that comes from the action plan. We were very, very fortunate to receive some some press before the work began from WBEZ, who understood the nature of the issue and really presented it in a real way for Chicago and Illinois to understand the urgency of the work we were about to tackle. And we were very fortunate too, because not only did we hear the facts and the data that we got from our own Illinois Department of Higher Education and other groups, and received the support from organizations like Women Employed with presenting the data, we also heard from our Illinois Black students on their lived experience in transitioning from high school to college and their experience while on our college campuses. So it was like I said, an incredible experience to move through that and develop the action plan. We talked a little bit earlier about what the data shows, but this is a real example of how it looks in real time from 2013 to 2019. You see that gap. I mean, it is incredible to see the loss within our higher education ecosystem and the loss to Illinois in this regard. Because it's not just what's happening in the Black community. This is happening to all of Illinois. Now, and I wanted the audience to take a real look at what these statistics look like when they play out in real time in the experience of our Black students. And it starts with even the high school graduation rate, the difference between the graduation rate of our Black students and our white students in Illinois. And then that handoff to college, you see that gap starts right away with 70% of our white students going on to college and only 54% of our Black students. And then the retention rates. Once we enter college, something happens in that ecosystem that also makes it difficult to even stay in college. And we've looked at some of that, and we'll talk about a little of that this afternoon. Then the difference in the graduation rates, what it takes to go to and through college, and then the employment rate. Once our Black students graduate from our colleges with that college degree, the employment rate is different in terms of how we experience the employment in the career workplace. And so these are some of the statistics that were presented to the working group as we looked at the really what we would say the crisis and the devastation that's being experienced by our Black students. You know, you talked a little bit about the mission statement, and it's important to the work because it's important to have a mission statement that really grounds us in the work. And basically, we want to help Black students and their families and communities thrive and survive in Illinois. And if you recently within the last week, McKinsey published a study on what's happening to Black people across the country, and you could tell the question that was asked in their publication is, what could be gained if racial gaps are closed? What would the world look like? I mean, and that's an incredible question to ask. What could be gained if we were to close these gaps? We talked a little bit about the members of the working group and their work. And again, we saw that women employed was an important component of our work. But we also had, we were fortunate to have organizations like AT&T and Deloitte and the Joyce Foundation and Chicago Public Schools support the work alongside of our public university and private university and community college presidents who are also members of the working group. We talked a little bit about what's the framework? How did we look at the work? And we designed the work around looking at these issues, the affordability, institutional funding, the preparedness, what happens when we get there, enrollment and program choice. If you even look at the majors that are chosen by Black students, the majority of those majors, many of them start with low wages. And so we really have to focus and provide more information to our students when they're even choosing a major. What happens with our students when they go onto the campuses? Are they feeling as if they are a part of the campus culture? And our Black students who spoke to us talked about their well-being. There was a lot of requests for mental health and other cultural and structural supports to help them be retained. And then making sure that that degree was strongly tied to opportunities for a career. And when we finish the work, our action plan covers certain potential interventions. How do we increase funding? How do we make sure that the college is affordable? If you look at even the income gaps between students and between students of color and white students, how much does a Black family have to provide their child for access to higher education? and then looking at culture and climate and student well-being and asking these essential questions about what can we do to impact the success model for our Black students. This is just a little bit of a sort of our timeline that we followed in putting the work together as we move through looking at the facts and looking at the data and having really critical conversations among members of the group and critical breakout sessions that led to the development of the action plan and the final report. And again, as you know, we're prepared to launch our action plan. So where we are, again, we're Chicago State is developing on our campus the Illinois Center for Education Equity. We'll have an advisory council, which you've agreed to participate on. We are really looking to hire a director for the center and making sure that the work not only lives on in our Illinois Center for Education Equity, but you also know that our work has been incorporated into the 10-year strategic plan of the Illinois Board of Higher Education. So that organization that really leads higher education in Illinois will also create metrics and data that will help improve outcomes for our Black students. So we're moving through our phases. Our action plan was released, and it was incredible the amount of public attention that was provided through our media. There were publications in the Tribune and Inside Higher Education and other statewide publications that picked up the work that was completed and exemplified in the action plan. So these are just a few of the quotes and from the publicity and media that we received. And the media was not just focused on the action plan, it also focused on students themselves. So some of the media outlets even interviewed students who were participants in the working group or who provided input to the action plan. We talked a little bit about where the work will sit on our campus. It will sit in what we call our Institute for Solutions of Urban Populations. Chicago State has broken down the social determinants of health and well-being into actionable steps and formed an institute that is part of the statewide Illinois Innovation Network. As part of the education access and quality determinant, we have formed the Illinois Center for Education Equity. Again, the directives in the action plan are to ensure that we make sure that we're focused on and taking real steps to remove barriers to higher education for our Black students, focused on all phases, what happens in high school that could obstruct and interrupt that transfer to higher education. We're looking at how can we make sure that college is affordable for our Black families, looking at institutional funding. And the thing that's great about all of this, as people sat in that room and really were involved in the action in the working group, people started moving. They didn't wait for the action plan. And many of our public universities have already implemented policies, funding practices that are already impacting Black student access to higher education, particularly when it comes to affordability and policies that obstruct and impede access. So for example, one of our public higher education institutions took a look at, remove the requirement for looking at standardized test scores for access to scholarships and instead are relying solely on GPAs. Immediate impact on scholarship access for Black students, because it has been known for decades that standardized testing basically has significant bias in among Black students and other minority students when it comes to those scoring. And so why are we using something that we know operates to the detriment of our children in assessing their academic ability? And we also know that grades are a stronger predictor of success in college. So already we've seen people seeing success with some of the policy implementations and recommendations. In short, when we looked at I talked about how the death of George Floyd and the murder of George Floyd was a pivotal incident for many in America, as we started to look closely at how our Black people were experiencing everything in a pandemic. So I think that the work that has come out and the work that will go forward will not only support our state, but will also support our nation.
Thank you for that overview. And for the people that are signed on right now, yes, we are going to make this recording available. And yes, we will provide all the links so that you can see the equity plan for yourself and go into it in as much detail as you want to. This is something that is near and dear to me. I am an alum of an Illinois public institution for undergrad, went from Chicago Public School straight into an undergrad. And what is so disheartening is that when we were having some of these conversations with the students, and even some of the ones from my alma mater, the stories were the same as they were back, and I won't date myself, you can just guess for yourself, but they were the same as when I was there. And it is, I am glad to know that we're in a place. I also sat on the advisory council for the strategic plan for IDHE. And I'm glad we're finally at a place where it's not about lip service anymore. And it's not about putting out a statement anymore. And they know that we have to make real actionable change, and that it's not just one magic bullet. It doesn't just sit with the institutions. It sits with the institutions. It sits with the high schools. It sits with employers. It is across the board. It's in our legislators and the policies that we have that allow some of this structural and systemic racism and discrimination to continue. It sits with the trustees and everyone else that's responsible for hiring the teachers and administrators that represent the student body. So with that, the Illinois Board of Higher Education recently issued new data showing that there's a 34% decrease in college enrollment for Black students since 2013. So that's up from the 29% since the work was started, President Scott. So what do you attribute this drop in enrollment? If you could, guess, what do you think that it would be? And how does Illinois begin to address the barriers to and through higher education for Black students specifically?
I mean, first of all, it starts in our school systems. Mm-hmm. And first of all, and I want one thing that we were very intentional about in looking at this work is that this was not intended to blame our children mm-hmm. or our neighborhoods, but it really is that we first of all need to shift the narrative from blaming victims to really looking at what have we done? What have we created that we need to dismantle that is having this sort of impact mm-hmm. across the state on our children? So, I mean, first of all, flip that narrative. Mm-hmm. Look at what happens inside of our high schools. First of all, access to college-going experiences for Black students. For years, for decades, we've had college experiences for students you can attend inside of your high school through dual credit or come on a college campus through dual enrollment. Those opportunities in a percentage-wise are not made available to Black students. So they don't even get to try on that college experience ahead of time. That has been proven to improve college-going behaviors. Mm-hmm. Exposing our children to careers and opportunities that are available after a college education. A college education keeps your community and you personally more healthy. You're a better citizen in terms of your civic activity if you have a college education. But we have not made that connection clear for our students and their families. And cost is a real barrier, mm-hmm. real barrier.
And I think one of the things is that what people don't understand is that it shouldn't matter what zip code. You shouldn't have to go
Right.
to a good high school to get the
Yeah,
same
absolutely.
information and access everyone else receives. You shouldn't have to, play the selective enrollment game and hope you hit the jackpot and, and be able to get the access that everyone else receives. And because if you don't know how to navigate that system, if you aren't astute enough to be able to, or you've just never been exposed to begin with, you lose out on so much opportunity. And you don't even get the information to know that college can be affordable. And I know Chicago, please tell us about the program that you have at Chicago State that's offering scholarships and free tuition and things of that sort, but they never get that information.
First of all, getting information to people. Like you said, we have a freshman program, a pre-freshman program called our Rise Academy. Students can take that first year of college absolutely debt-free. Everything is paid for. Books are paid for. Internet is paid for. A laptop is available to you. Extensive career advisement and leadership advisement. And by starting with a 5-week academy that prepares every student for that college experience. This doesn't just benefit students who are coming to us from low performing high schools. Any student, no matter what your ACT or your GPA, benefits from a pre-college experience through our Rise Academy. And the data that we have seen after just 1 year Rise has been startling. Our
Mhm.
who went through there, their retention, their success is almost, it's significant. So we know that pre-college experience is important. But just like you said, Cherita, it's also important that information is provided to families and students about scholarship awards, how to prepare yourself for that transition to college, how to even complete that FAFSA.
Mhm.
To make sure the students are aware of, not only the financial opportunities, but the career opportunities that could be available to them with a college experience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And talking to them about all of the options that are available. And so you don't have to go to the schools that you hear all the time that, counselors push all the time. We have to be pushing out counselors to share even more data. What is the success rate? What is the graduation, the attrition rate of Black students at some of these predominantly white institutions, as opposed to going to a predominantly Black institution where you may fare better? So
Right.
we have to have those honest conversations and not be afraid or shy away from them to make sure that we're setting our students up for as much success as possible. So if someone is listening, for the people that are listening and they're like, well, how do we help? What can we do to change this? Because these stats are startling. So if someone wants to, roll up their sleeves and help out with this plan, where should they start and what should their next steps be?
First of all, take a look at the plan itself and say, where do I fit in? Because in building the working group that put together the plan, we had all segments of Illinois involved. Our philanthropic organization, our public university presidents and students and graduate students were involved in the work. We had community organizations, faith leaders, politicians. So it's not just somebody else's job.
Mm-hmm.
Clear that higher education is all of our jobs, and all of us should want this level of success for all of Illinois, including our Black students. So you find yourself in that report. You're there. If you live in Illinois, your opportunity in participation is inside of that report. Also think to yourself, if I can't physically roll up my sleeves, can I provide money? This work will take money. It will take contributions of people who want to make sure that the center is properly staffed. If you're a data analyst and you want to make sure we have the proper data support, help us build the data system that will yield the right metrics for the work. There's so many opportunities for participation. Serve as a mentor. in an institution where you can help students, guide students through to and through college. Give your time, give your money, but also give your ideas and bring your corporation to the table. We are trying to encourage corporations to be part of our success in making sure that when a Black student shows up with a college degree, you're going to close that wage gap, because it starts right at the door, making sure that you are paying your Black students and your Black employees in the same way that you're paying your white employees. Look for those gaps and making sure that you're building a culture that is inclusive. There is something to be said for all of the corporations now that are hiring diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals to support better inclusion in their workforce.
Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you talked about employers, and because you were so thoughtful, about who you engaged at this table, employers were definitely there and definitely very engaged in the conversation in a very meaningful way. So can you, talk about, how employers can make a meaningful contribution? You talked about the pay gap and making sure that they are paying their people equitably, but there were definitely other ideas shared at the table. So can you kind of share what you heard from the employers? And, do you believe that they're really invested in helping us fix this?
They're first of all, are they really invested? There are people who are counting the number of dollars that were committed to closing the equity gaps between how white employees and Black employees are experiencing the workplace. And you remember seeing the people posting that said, have you checked in with your Black employers going through a pandemic, as we're going through a period of racial reckoning? Are you asking them how they're doing? Are they doing okay? And then the next answer was, they're not. People have blinded themselves into thinking that just because a Black employee is sitting at the desk and shows up every day, that they're thriving in the workplace. Now that we're being, the data has been being revealed on equity in the workplace, we're seeing all kinds of inequities show up in people's data. So it's not just the people are there. You have to make sure what being present in your workforce really means. So employers can, first of all, look at their own metrics and look at their own data. If you look around the room, look left, look right, and you don't see anybody that doesn't look like you, then maybe you have not built an inclusive workforce that supports the participation of all of your employers. So really it's starting at home, figuring out how people are experiencing your workforce and looking at your own data. And then get involved with higher education, making sure that you actually are intentional about entering classes of college students. If you're only recruiting from certain schools every year, you can guarantee the same result.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily guarantee equity for all of our communities.
Yeah. And, one of the biggest things with my workforce background, and then once upon a time I was a recruiter, that most jobs are found by networking, right? And employers, it's good to have the referral bonuses and things of that sort, but it also does not promote diversity, because your network is typically, the people that you live next to, who you went to school with, who you hang out with, and it does not create a diverse workforce. So they really have to look at that. And one of the other things, and I think I was in the employer group, one of the other things that we talked a lot about is making sure that you're offering paid internships. Because the reason why a lot of Black students cannot participate in internships, well, one of the reasons is a lot of times we don't know about them. But the other thing is that because we have to work and we can't afford to work for free. And so this notion of having free interns creates an inequitable system unintentionally. And even those paid internships, look at your roster and see who you're hiring and who you're bringing in for those paid internships, and making sure that you're giving opportunities to people that would not otherwise have those opportunities. So you have to go a little bit further to make sure that you're stepping out of your box and bringing in individuals, but not just bringing them in, but then you have to check your culture and make sure, just like on these college campuses, that it's a place where they feel welcome, where they belong, and that they want to stay, and that they can thrive, and that they're being promoted, and that they're giving those opportunities for promotion. So, so one of the other things that I know that the employer group talked about is making sure that employers are aligning with institutions and making sure that we're offering the degrees and the curriculum where, you know, that's in demand. And so you don't have Black students taking up courses where, you know, the industry is not in demand, and or the pay is not at the level that's going to afford them the quality of life that they want, or the quality of life that's going to change the trajectory for their family. What's good use of being first generation, second generation, if you're in the same position as your family was before you left for school?
Absolutely. I mean, and you look at, for example, the tech sector is booming, and the mayor recently went with a team of people to California to encourage Silicon Valley to think, and those in the tech sector, to think about Chicago as a destination for building out the tech sector. And the next boom for tech should be in Chicago. And I agree with that strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Strategy should also include, how do we make sure there's full participation of all Chicago citizens and all of Illinois in that booming sector? What segments have reached out to universities like Chicago State and other universities that service large minority populations to make sure that the curriculum will support a student's transition into the tech sector, that there are internships and opportunities for learning and curricula development inside of these institutions. So I challenge people who are listening to this to say that I have to make sure that when I have employment needs, that the sectors that I know are growing in high demand are also being show up in institutions that serve large minority populations.
So you mentioned the Illinois Center for Education Equity that will launch this winter, housed at Chicago State. Through the center, how will you sustain engagement of the diverse group you convened and sustain the momentum to reach the shared goals?
So first of all, I cannot tell you how thrilled we were when I went out to ask people to participate. I never got an answer no. I did get, I can't come, but can I send someone else?
Mm-hmm.
But the answer, but no one said no. So we know that there is, in all segments of Illinois, there is interest in this work, and not only interest in just learning, but interest in participating to move the needle for our Black students. So we will sustain the momentum in a couple of ways. Our advisory committee will have its cross-sectional, will still have that cross-sectional appearance. We will convene briefings at least 2 to 3 times a year, so that people can hear about how the work is being deployed and how the metrics are being impacted by the work itself, and what are the early learnings from what we're seeing. We will continue to make sure that we have the funding needed to continue the work. We've already had offers from philanthropic groups and other universities to help fund the work, and also send their researchers here to work alongside of others in making sure the initiative lives on. So there's opportunity out. So I see the energy is still there. The enthusiasm is still there.
I'm going to pause and say if anyone participating has any questions, you can drop them in the chat. I'm monitoring them as our conversation goes along. And I know one of the questions that came up was around the data, and if there was any information around gender and other intersectional identities. And I believe you did have the data broken down by gender as well. Is that right?
Yeah, we've seen data by gender, and unfortunately, if you disaggregate the data between Black women and Black men, what we also see is that that Black men are trailing Black women
Mhm.
in access and completion.
Mhm. And then I'm going to add on to that because I know through our work with IHAN Illinois Higher Education Network, which Women Employed is a part of, it helps to lead. We were able to advocate for policy that is now mandating all of our Illinois public institutions to begin to collect data on student parents. Because we have to be able to know who's on our campuses. And so that was just passed. The governor should be signing it any day now. We believe that's happening any day now. So we will be able to begin to affirm what we know. And that is a lot of our students are also parents, which set a different set of needs and resources. And so, but we have to be able to understand where they are and who they are and what they look like so that we can come up with better solutions. And President Scott, you were nodding your head. So I know Chicago State also has a.
Right, we've looked at the data. At least 30% of our students have at least one dependent. So childcare and access to quality childcare and childcare resources are critical need.
Mhm.
And kind of things that also can disrupt an opportunity for an internship or an opportunity for any kind of experiential learning experience because of the responsibilities that students have at home. Many of our children, many of our students on our campus, not only some of them have children, but also have other dependent responsibilities. They're caring for an aging parent, they're caring for other siblings. So things have to be considered. I mean, the bottom line, baseline for this is meet students where they are.
Yeah.
Have an understanding of not only their past academic credentials, but look at what are their current needs that could interfere with completion of a college education. And students manage those needs early, so that doesn't become what derails them from a college career.
We have another question is from Marcy. Is college enrollment gap in Illinois due to Black students going outside the state for college, or is it that they're not going to college at all?
You know what? I mean, some of that might be because we have seen Illinois is probably the number 2 in the country for out-migration of all of its students to other universities. But that's not the only reason for this dramatic a drop. You see it if you look at some of the report cards coming from our public high schools that are readily available. You'll see that there's been a decline in even college attendance in many of our high schools. I mean, that's why Chicago State was very intentional in forming relationships with our high schools and offering dual enrollment experiences, because our neighborhood high schools, not the cream of the crop, I mean, not the ones where they're selective, but those are important vehicles for our students too. But our local everyday high school, you see the college enrollment drop in the statistics of the public schools.
Would Chicago State be willing to have a child care facility for students or maybe even family housing if funding were available?
Well, first of all, let's take a minute to just celebrate, because we are in the process of building our child care center on our campus after years of not having child care opportunities for our students. The demolition is underway. It will be in our College of Education. It will be managed by our College of Education and its faculty and students. So we're very excited to have that facility on the way. But we unfortunately we do have a shortfall in trying to complete the Child Care Development Center. So we do need donations. We are in the process of trying to raise money to complete the center. We've received a generous donation from a member of our foundation board for a playground that will support the center. So we're excited about those things, but we do need financial support for that.
That is amazing news. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, there was two reasons why I wanted to do this. One is because we have a lot of stakeholders and supporters that I know believe in and support this work. And I wanted them to hear firsthand from you the data and the action. Two, we have a lot of supporters and stakeholders who have the ability to financially support this work. And I wanted them to hear from me that I would love if they supported this work, and not just through Women Employed, but directly through the center and directly through Chicago State. So I wanted to make sure that I put that out there. There are 53 people right now that I can see for sure that are on this call. So you heard it from me, folks.
And and here's the thing, people often think I don't have much to give, but if you, no matter what your capacity is, it's than what we have, as my mother would always say. And so and if you can encourage friends to donate to our Child Development Center, I mean, we expect it to be an incredible, rich experience for children to come through a Child Development Center that's run by a college of education, where the offerings will be cutting edge, and the care and keeping of our children will be culturally competent. So we're really excited about it.
Thank you for that. And I know it's not often you hear another nonprofit president asking to raise money for something else, but I truly believe Chicago and Illinois has a lot of wealth, and there's enough to go around. And I think we will all be enriched in all of our goals. And this is part of our mission, will move forward by the support of this work.
I mean, for example, the statistics show that 1 in 10 Black graduates in the state got their degree from Chicago State. And that's a statistic from the Illinois Board of Higher Education. So that Chicago State is an important element of our diversity and higher education ecosystem in Illinois. So whatever we can do to support students getting in, through, and completing a college degree at Chicago State is good for Illinois. So that's that. I believe that. I see it in our data every day. So Cherita, thank you for doing the positive thing and encouraging donations to CSU. I appreciate that.
Of course. And I want people to know, so you had mentioned a couple things around the action plan, affordability. Women Employed has for many years been strong advocates around financial aid and making sure that our Illinois MAP funds are fully funded. And we did get a sizable amount in the budget this past year. It is still not fully funded, so we will continue to fight and advocate to make sure that that is fully funded. We're part of the group that's working on creating an equitable funding formula for Illinois institutions, which is paramount to this work. We're also very, very much knee deep in the, reforming how remediation is done in this state. And it is detrimental to Black students and Latinx students. And so we have been pushing for reform on the policy side, and then on the practice side, putting policy into practice. We received a grant where we're working with 10 community colleges throughout the state of Illinois, the ones that no one hear about, to help them figure out how to reform development education on their campuses. So that work is happening, and we'll continue to do that work. And of course, we need the support for that. And all of that is, really aligned with our strategic plan. And we also just released a new strategic plan. And the purpose of this plan for the next couple of years is to grow the economic power of women, and particularly Black and Latinx women and women who are in low paid roles. So throughout this process, we help facilitate conversations with some graduates, several Black women who had graduated from Chicago State, to make sure that their voices were reflected in the action plan. But from your experience, President Scott, as an educator and now a leader in education, what does the higher ed system need to be able to build the economic power for more Black and Latinx women? You're on mute.
We make sure people have, as we talked about in the action plan, have the access and access to education, first of all. And then secondly, making sure that in providing people access, we make sure that the students, things that derail a student in a college education are not present. That's why we developed our RISE Academy, so that making sure that students have those essentials like books. You have no idea how students are, they get into a class, they finally have their financial aid in place, and then they don't have enough money left to buy books.
Mm-hmm.
Our RISE Academy books are off the table because the books are already paid for.
Mm-hmm.
Free, thinking about things like that, books and computers and internet access. And for our adult learners, making sure that when they transition back to education, we understand that it is indeed a transition.
Mm-hmm.
That we prepare them to learn. We prepare them to go back into a learning environment by providing them with study tips, study techniques, tutoring, and childcare if it's needed, and transportation resources if that's needed. So we start thinking holistically about what derails a student and making sure we try to meet student, even food. How many students are, the statistic on how many college students are food insecure are, so we have a food pantry on our campus so that students don't, that's not the thing that's gonna stop you from being here, because we're making food available to you and it's at no cost.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be very intentional about how you think about what you're doing in higher education.
And it can be done. So I know Chancellor Delgado of Chicago Community Colleges, they have a food pantry, and he had a program where he started the Chancellor's Fund. So a student could apply for, barrier relief if they had a small fee, so that was stopping them to register for the next, semester. So just thinking creatively about things like that. I know my daughter did not go to school in Illinois, but at her school and through the process, I've heard one other school do this in Illinois, but they have like an Explore Fund where students can apply for scholarships to participate in things like study abroad or in different student activities that have fees associated with them, because some students are at school just by the skin of their teeth financially, and they can't afford any extras. But those extras give you exposure, and those extras open up your network. And so those extras, you have to be able to provide students equitably access to those extras so that they can have that exposure and gain those networks too. And I think all of that is important.
To your point, this year we, our student employment, we've been intentional. We're becoming even more intentional about student employment campus, and making sure not only that students have the opportunity to work, but the work is experiential. That are having a learning experience, that the work becomes an internship on our college campus, so that that it's not just we're sitting you in front of a desk in the library and checking books out for people, but you are going to have an experience that is going to teach you something, and that's something that will add to your resume. And you talked about really having sort of small funding on your campus that would better support students. We have this fund, where we look at your account and we see that you owe us $500 or less. We'll just put the money in, because, so you don't have to worry about that small debt that makes you think you can't stay in college. Or we have another program called Cougar's Return, where students who owe us $2,500 or less, we call you and you say, hey, you owe us $2,500 or less. Agree to come back to college, reinstate yourself, and we will forgive that debt if you are here 3 of the next 4 semesters. So it's things like that, and really making sure that debt finances are not the reason why students are not continuing.
I needed a job when I was an undergrad. Um,
We all had a lot of jobs. I can't count the jobs I had. You know, I worked a lot of places.
Me too.
Yeah.
all through campus, trying to make it work. Um, so thank you. This was such an amazing conversation. And, thank you, President Scott, for your bold and leadership and your unapologetic commitment to improving conditions and outcomes for Black students throughout Illinois. And I am so looking forward to working with you. And before I let everyone go, I want to make sure, because if I don't, my staff will, be upset with me. But I need to make sure that I invite all of you all to join us on August 3rd at noon for a timely conversation with White House correspondent, political analyst, and author April Ryan as we commemorate Black Women's Equal Pay Day and discuss what it will take to ensure an equitable recovery for Black women, grow our economic power, and close the wealth gap at the intersection of race and gender. And I'm sure someone is either putting the registration link in our chat or will be, and it's also on our website. So President Scott, I'm gonna give you the last word.
So first of all, thank you so much, Women Employed, and Cherita, for inviting me for this important conversation. Hopefully I've outlined the opportunities that people have for engaging in the work. There are all kinds of pathways that you can follow to support our Black students in college access and completion and career in Illinois. So hopefully someone heard something today that inspires them to get involved and engage in all of the work that both of our organizations are doing, including the important work of Women Employed. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.